You're listening to the Ones Ready podcast, a team of Air Force Special Operators forged in combat with over 70 years of combined operational experience, as well as a decade of selection instructor experience. If you're tired of settling and you want to do something you truly believe in, you're in the right place. Now here's your host, former Prep Course Ops Superintendent and current Special Reconnaissance Training Guru, Trent Segmiller.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another juicy episode with the Ones Ready crew here. I like to come on here and just kind of free rein the intros, but I've been told that I need to cover a few things before we jump into all the goodness that we're going to get into today. Mostly short and old jokes about Jared, but just want to say thanks to everybody out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave us a review. All we get is 5-star reviews, so if you could go in there and put in like a 4.5-star review and just criticize us a little bit, it would be pretty amazing. Or 5, it's fine. And then also, this wouldn't be possible without a lot of the other folks out there that support us, and if nothing else, moral support. And then there's also people like Hoist, and if you're listening and not watching, you can see I'm drinking a Hoist this morning. And they send me Hoist, and they support me that way, and they keep my electrolytes up and keep me from dying out here in San Antonio, because it's stupid hot right now.
It's hot in the Northwest, too. It's hot everywhere, baby.
You're not alone in this.
Don't come at me with it's hot in the Northwest. You're so full of it.
Hot.
Oh my goodness.
It's 107 today.
Look, Phoenix gets to talk smack, but unless you got San Antonio heat going on for the entire summer, you're like, oh, we had one hot day. I don't know why we're talking about the weather all of a sudden. It's just I just revert back to my old
I think
habits.
we know why we're talking about the weather.
Here. 100 degrees here and 100% humidity at 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to hear, oh, San Antonio's so hot. Come on, get out.
Anyway, Hoist is a great way to get over the heat and to keep yourself hydrated. It's IV level hydration, and we've talked about it before. I'm a little bit of a cynic, but it's one of the best things that I've ever used, and I drink it just about every day. So beyond that, today we're going to talk about something that we've received a lot of messages about. I know everybody's like, let's talk about the pipeline schools and some of the stuff that you guys went through. And every time I see the message, can you guys talk about Airborne? I'm always like, why would we talk about Airborne?
Why would we talk about Airborne?
It's 3 weeks long. It's a little, I don't know. I don't want to ruin it, so we'll just get into it. We're going to talk about Airborne School today and all the goodness and everything that we learned throughout that process, and let you know all the secrets. And there are no secrets. It's been there forever. So let's start off with Jared, obviously, because he was there at the inception of Airborne School. And it was actually his idea to jump out of a plane.
Yeah.
So I think
Jared
first
was like, how can we get to this place faster? Jared was like, hey guys, it's gonna be crazy. What if we jumped? And everybody was like, what?
Dude, you see that plane over there? Anyway,
Dude.
But if you've been, everybody knows the first thing that you go through when you get to Airborne schools, just like a few other schools, is there's going to be a PT test. So, Jared, if you wouldn't mind walking us through what is the PT test? Is it difficult? And do people not make it? What happens on that first day?
Well, so it's the Army Combat Fitness Test. It's not hard, but it is, I guess it would be more difficult than, or maybe not more difficult, it's more relevant than what the old Army, I think probably when all three of us went through was, you had your 2 mile run, push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups, I think is all it was, if I remember right. Yeah. And that was day one. And you had to have arrived with a past PT test. And then day one, you had to do another Army PT test in order to continue on training. And surprisingly, a lot of people would actually fail that. I never understood that. And it's not only the Army PT test, because we actually get a lot of people that pass the past test and then, before they ship out, and then they fail it again. So that seems to be a common trend, not just with Army Airborne School, but that's a different topic altogether. But so yeah, now it's the Army Combat Fitness Test, which has a bunch of different movements in it. It's got deadlifts, standing power throws. It's got hand release push-ups.
The dreaded leg tuck.
Yeah.
The dreaded leg tuck.
Da da da. It's got like a
Why
drag,
is it so hard?
Not a prowler, but it's a sled drag kind of thing. And there's still a 2 mile run, so it's got some other things into it that are supposed to be more functionally based than your standard old school. Hey, this is the military. We're doing push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and a couple of mile run. So it's a little bit more relevant these days.
I love this. Like, I don't know why it happened to you. I watched, so there's the old 41, right? So it's the AFPT back when we went through, and Peaches and I were kind of laughing because while Peaches was running Currahee with the boys of Easy Company and Band of Brothers, I actually went in like 2003. I went a little bit later. But there were a lot of people that came in there, and their heart rate was already like 180. I went as I was a phys tech. I wasn't in the pipeline when I went through airborne school. So I was a regular. I couldn't have been any more regular. Like, that dumb morale patch that says regular guy? I earned my regular guy patch by going through. They didn't even know what I was. Like, we'll talk about who Sergeant Airborne is, but they were like, what do you do? And I would explain it to them, and they would just be like, I don't even know what that is. And I'd just be like, yeah, it's silly. Anyway, what's up? But no kidding, that PT test was hilarious because people were stressing it. For people that don't understand, you got to understand what airborne school is. It's awesome. You get to jump out of a plane. They put through tens of thousands of people a year. It is
so many
50
people.
years of Army tradition unimpeded by progress or common sense. Like, you absolutely just go through. It is like, and it makes no sense. And it starts with that PT test. So you're doing this PT test, and there's one Sergeant Airborne, and you can hear it. You can hear it from 40 feet away. You had to get 42 push-ups, right? And you can hear it from 100 yards away. 41, 41, 41, 41. Some dude knocking out push-ups that are not counting, and this guy's going to 41 them to death and send him packing. And it was great. It was the greatest.
There were always those rumors that they wanted to get rid of a certain number of people on day one, but they couldn't get rid of Air Force guys because they can't just 41 us to death and then have to explain it, back up through the chain. But I don't know. But there were a lot of people that didn't make it. Back to Jared. What part of where were you in the pipeline when you went to Airborne? Because
that was post NDOC. You do. This is where my memory's going really bad. I don't know. It was somewhere in the pipeline. I don't know.
Great answer.
I really
Peaches.
don't know.
Yeah, really good. Trent. So normally how people do it is that they'll go to, so you go to NDOC to dive school, because dive school is like the big attrition after NDOC. And then usually after that, they'll start looking for holes in the schedule to plug people into, and Airborne was pretty close in that beginning part. So good answer, Pete.
I know. I know. I totally boloed my credibility and everything like that. But I do remember, like, there's never a kind of stoppage. I mean, they put through a ton of people, and it's, every week a class is starting and stuff like that. And I do want to clarify, like, because now that I'm thinking about it, I think Airborne still does the basic Army PT test. I don't think they're doing the Army Combat Fitness test. I think it's still... I
don't think they are either.
Yeah.
I think it's still the same one.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I want to retract my statement about the Army Combat Fitness test. I'm pretty sure they're still doing the push-ups, sit-ups. I don't even think they're doing pull-ups and then the 2 mile run. They've really progressed through the years.
You just have to get your chin above the bar and hang there, right? Or something? It was
for
silly.
8 seconds. No, yeah. It was no kidding. It's a flexed arm hang is what they call it. And just in case anybody can't tell, I want to tell you the amount of show prep collectively that we did to what's going on at Airborne School right now is less than 0. I don't know if you could do less than 0. We're just straight going off of 20-year-old memories. Trent, when did you hit this bad boy? When in your pipeline, or was it after the pipeline, or?
It was 2005. So back when I came through, and all you had to do technically to become a SAUT was Airborne and SEER as a weather guy before you came over and did anything else. I got orders out of my weather unit, and just, I was forecasting weather one day, and then I was out there doing a PT test, which is still, guys, it wasn't hard. Like, it was a weird experience, but we were all sitting here trying to remember what it was like going through Airborne School, and it's like, that was a really long time ago, And so I think, Aaron, for you, this next one is, do you remember ground week at all? I know we talked about it a little bit.
Do I ever? Boy, do I ever. Because again, a weird situation for me. So I was no kidding, regular guy Air Force. I was not special in any sense of the word. Phys tech, living at Andrews Air Force Base. The only reason they even let me go is because we had a spot for it. And I was like, listen, I will drive my own car to Fort Benning, Georgia from Washington, D.C. to go to this, to save money. And they were like, all right, yeah, cool, man, go ahead. So no kidding, got the spot, and there I am, and got through the PT test and got through the weekend, and there we were. Tower week, it's ground week is the first week, not tower week. Ground week is absolutely the most ridiculous thing of all time. So you're there, the companies are huge. There were like, 400 people in your company or something, like 400 students?
Yeah, to start, right? It was a pile of people.
Absolutely ridiculous. So it's like, imagine trying to do anything with 200 people. And, the biggest dig that everybody has on Airborne School is like, oh, it's big Army and you have to do all these things. Let me tell you about the wires, everybody. So there's these wires, right?
Cables.
And the wires are exactly what they sound like. The wires are so that you can stand in a straight line. I'm not joking. These are things. And everybody that's gone through Airborne School knows what standing on the wires is. And no kidding, you stand on the wire so that your line is perfectly straight. If you have to be out there at 6 o'clock in the morning for ground week, here's what it sounds like. All right, guys and girls, you have to be here at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then the other guy turns around and goes, okay, if they want us out here at 6, you got to be on the wires at 5:45. We're going to take accountability. And then the person that's in charge of your little line of wires goes, all right, well, if we got to be out here for 5:45 for their accountability, we got to be out here at 5:15 standing on the wires. And then the guy that's in charge of half of your line that lives in your dorm area, he's like, all right, listen, guys, if we got to be out here at 5:15 on the wires for accountability, I'm going to need to see you guys out here at 4:45 standing on these wires.
Got to be safe
for accountability. Just to be safe, let's make it 4:30. So no kidding, you were standing on those wires. Sometimes you don't even know why. Somebody will stand on the wire and you'll literally be like, what's that guy standing on the wire for? And everybody goes, I don't know. And all of a sudden, 35 people, 100 people, 200 people standing on the wires for no idea. And you're literally just like, guys, what are we doing? And you're like, oh, we're just standing on the wires. And you're like, oh, okay. And then that's your life.
If you go to a public place and just start a line with 15 people, that's what it's like. Eventually you will get people getting in line with you.
Hey, is this a line? What are we waiting for? I don't know, but I'm ahead of you. So
super excited about it.
You know what? Nobody's going to believe that either.
No,
this sounds so ridiculous.
You need to hit us up in the I'm telling you, everybody else that's ever stood on a wire, you just need to put us out there. So ground week, that's no kidding how it started. It was no kidding all right, boys, here we go. The premier airborne infantry method of airborne, hearkening back to the Band of Brothers and jumpers into St. Mary, France and into Normandy. Here's where it all starts, everybody, the rich history. Now be there an hour and a half early and stand on these wires and shut up and BS with your friends. And that was I distinctly remember the very first day of Airborne at Ground Week, sitting there and just going, cool, I guess I'm just going to stand on these wires then. And that's what you did. That's
why it's so funny whenever people are concerned about Airborne School, that are hitting us up, in the comments or the DMs or whatever, because they're, legitimately worried about Airborne School. Because if you actually go to the Airborne School website, it talks about, in fact, I actually intensive program, and there's a couple other words they use in there, and it's like
they have a website.
They have a website.
I can't imagine that they do.
Yeah, and it's just so funny, man. But also you have the parachute landing falls. So I was actually pretty fortunate where my class fell in on. I think it was over Thanksgiving. We only had 3 days of ground week. So that's kind of lucky, because essentially you're doing 5 days, and it's not 5 days straight of PLF, but a good portion of that is just learning how to parachute landing fall, which is
you were falling. No kidding. You were jumping. You're learning how to hit the earth as softly as you can, which is exactly as much fun as it sounds. You were jumping off of platforms, sometimes the swing landing trainer, and they are no kidding just being like, hey, See that wall? Fall off of it. All right, cool. Here's how you do that. And you do that for, I don't know, 40 hours a day. I don't remember how long I've had to do it. Remember the scene in the Avengers where Doctor Strange puts Loki into the time warp, and then Loki shows up and he's like, I've been falling.
He's just falling the whole
for
time.
30 minutes. That's essentially what Airborne Ground Week was like for me.
I do remember having it doesn't hurt. But I remember taking my shirt off at the end of that week and having just contact bruise, because you fallen in the same, feet, butt, lats.
Wow. Are
so
you
many
messing
times.
with 5 points of contact up this badly? Do you mean the pull-up muscle? Wow.
Fleshy pull-up muscle.
Because it doesn't matter.
pull-up muscle?
Look, I'll tell you what Sergeant. I'm going to skip to the end. What Sergeant Airborne says before you even jump is like, yeah, forget all that stuff. Just keep your feet and knees together, and you'll be fine, Airborne.
Sergeant Airborne, by the way.
Yeah.
Sergeant,
you, Trent. You own that.
Sergeant Airborne is somebody that maybe thought about RASP at some point in his life, but ended up at the 82nd. I don't know. And they didn't like him, so they sent him back to Airborne School to put on a black hat and yell at you about stuff and say things like "hua." And as an Air Force guy, I'll tell you it's a little bit confusing because I never knew when to throw the "hua" back. I was very confused. And so there were a few incidents while I was at Airborne School where some of the Air Force guys, we would yell "hua" at the wrong time, and Sergeant Airborne would get very, very upset. But they're the people that run your PT and all your training, and eventually tell you that if there will be no jump refusals, which is, I'm pretty sure, a lie. And they throw piles of people out of these planes that they never, but they're there for the whole time throughout Ground Week and Tower Week and all that other stuff, and making sure that you're.
They don't like hearing hoo-yah, Sergeant Airborne. They don't like that either.
We would just scream out "hoo" at random times, and they'd be like, "What the?" We're like, "Sorry, Sergeant, I'm Air Force. I don't know all these rules, man."
Well, since we're already talking about Sergeant Airborne and the Black Cats, how about those smoke sessions that they put you through, right?
Are you being sarcastic?
So for everybody that can't
yes.
see, we're using finger quotes. I love it. I don't remember what the Black Hats name. So the Black Hats are, just to clear it up for everybody, that's the cadre. The people that run Airborne School, and they're called Black Hats because they have these black baseball caps, and a lot of them do this like crazy ranger roll thing, and they've got bright shiny rank on, and it's a literal black hat. And they're called Sergeant Airborne. Everything there is rote memorization. For people that do not know what the Army does training by blunt force repetition and memorization. So everything is written, and they say the exact verbiage of things. I'm a proud graduate of Army Static Line Jump Master School, Fort Benning, Georgia. Quite recently, as a matter of fact, they are still doing the same thing that they did in 1943. I am positive of it. So Sergeant Airborne is everybody, right? So the smoke sessions, my favorite one of all time is we had this one black hat that would walk out, and every single time he saw us, he would just be like, "That's it," and he would call it scuffing us up. So he did this during Ground Week like 5 times, and it was like 20 push-ups or something. He'd be like, "Oh, the scuffing is happening. I'm bringing you the scunion." And you'd be like, what does that even mean? Like, what are you saying? Those words the letters don't belong in that order. It doesn't mean anything, Sergeant Airborne. So he got sick of having to yell at us. So he would stick his head, no kidding, out of an office window, and he'd go, "Auto scuff." And the first time he said it, auto scuff, we were like, what does that even mean? We were standing on the wires 40 minutes ahead of a showtime for no good reason. And we just looked at each other. We're like, what is he talking about? And he's like, "Auto scuff. Do push-ups now. I don't want to have to say the whole thing. I don't want to be mad at you. Just do it yourself." So he would basically just say the words auto scuff, and we'd be like, all right, this guy wants us to do push-ups. And that's what we would do every single time. It was the most ridiculous.
When you think about it, we were coming out of NDOC, coming out of, dive school. We're the best shape we've probably ever been in. And we are cocky, so cocky and arrogant.
That's the worst.
And I can only imagine from their point of view, just going like, these Air Force guys are the absolute worst, and we have to put them through here. I probably, thinking about how cocky we probably were, it's probably really bad.
The most annoying, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's one of my favorite sayings of all time is he sunk the ship that he was on just to kill the captain. I was in there with some PJ trainees that were those dudes that were straight up out of NDOC, shape of their lives. There's nothing, they couldn't do anything. What are you going to do? Literally, they would have to literally murder the other 295 students to make the 5 of them that they actually wanted to kill some, feel the pain. So these dudes would just own Sergeant Airborne all the time. They would do something and you would hear from the back, which is how they said hua or whatever they say there. And it would make him so mad. But they sunk the ship that they were on just trying to kill the captain. And all these other Army cats would they would be like, if you guys do not shut up, we are going to beat you all to death because we don't want to have to be involved in this smoke session.
We were the ones saying 0 instead of Sergeant Airborne saying 0. We would just get down and start doing 0, 0, 0, and you hear it in the back. Just stop.
Yeah. So the real physical requirements, the smoke sessions, are really not that big of a deal at Airborne. And I'm thinking about what was the hardest part of Airborne for me. And as I want to go back to the beginning a little bit, because I think in processing, which we kind of skipped over, was the hardest part of Airborne School. Because it was so confusing to me because thousands of people go through this thing all the time. I don't know what it was like for you guys, but I remember showing up.
Have it done.
And it was just a shit show. There's no other way to say it. They're just like, you're like, there's like random people running around like, hey, you got to get like your helmet and your sweatband and all this other stuff. And no one had like a compiled list. There was no line of people to go through to make sure it all happened. It's just like, hey, everybody have this stuff done or else you're not starting class. Go. Like where's the stencils?
Yeah, there was like the one supply. Yeah, there was like a porch that was like outside of supply, and you just kind of like stood on the porch for a little bit, and then somebody would yell at you for standing on the porch, and then you were like, well, I'm here to get my initial issue of supply, and they'd be like, oh, okay, you're in the right spot. Well, then why did you yell at me for standing on the porch? Why didn't you just start with that?
Yes. It's just one giant crap show, and then you go through ground week and you're like, yeah, this is stupid. But Tower Week, and I think we'll go to Jared for this one. Tower Week was actually, I thought, it was fun because Tower Week is so easy, and you actually get to jump out of the tower. But like, Jared, can you explain Tower Week and what you remember from it? And did you guys have to build the towers first? And how tall were they?
Yeah, we had to construct the towers first, and then
it's the Tower of Babel. It was a big ordeal. Am I right?
Well, Tower Week's you're still doing the swing line trainer, which honestly that was kind of fun. I mean, when you take all the other stuff aside from it, it's like, okay, cool. It was fun. You're learning your exit procedures, because at Airborne, you're only jumping the door. You're not jumping ramp like we do. So you're learning the technique so that you don't get caught up in the static line as you're going out, keeping a decent distance from the static line jumper in front of you. Funny enough, there's no jump refusals during that. I'm sure there probably are, but I did not experience it or see anybody with a jump refusal. And then you have the 250-foot tower. Was it Tower on Gower? Something like that they would say.
I have no idea.
Yeah, they
had too many, like,
everything had all kinds
of
sayings.
Right.
So yeah, the 250-foot tower, which as long as the winds were okay, they would use it and you would actually get the chance to do it. If the winds were, I don't know what the cutoff was, but if it was windy at all, they couldn't do it. So, if I remember right, I think it's either 2 or 4 jumpers at one time, and they essentially winch you up with the parachute up top of 250-foot tower and then release you, and that's where you learn to slip away, which is where you're grabbing a riser, and it's your very, very minimal way to turn or kind of drive the way that you want to go. So
you ain't turning that bad boy. That is such a lie.
I know.
First of all, fake news. So to tell people what Tower Week was, so there are 2 towers, right? There was the 34-foot tower, and the 34-foot tower had a door, and you were attached, no kidding, to a line, like to a wire. And there was a door that you could, no kidding, you would pretend like you're jumping out of. Why is it 34 feet? I'm glad you asked. Because at 34 feet, you cannot see the horizon. You can't see the actual ground as you're standing in the door. If you stand in the door like normal at 34 feet, I don't know why they didn't just go to 35, whatever. you can't see the ground. So it's exactly, they would tell you, yeah, at 34 feet, you can't see the ground. So when you exit the door, it's exactly like exiting. And then you no kidding zip line down this long steel line all the way to these berms. Now, let me tell you about my favorite part, my absolute favorite part about Army engineering. There's a million ways with modern technology, the freest, most prosperous country and in the history of mankind, the height of military power. And how do they stop you at the end of this line? 4 or 5 people are volunteers, and they catch your screaming 200-pound body as you're zip lining towards them. And their job is literally to help you not hurt yourself. It's essentially like human bowling, but airborne style. And it is the greatest.
So I was one of those volunteers, and it's a whole lot of fun, just like getting to hit everybody that comes down that wire.
You're just trucking them, like, and it's the worst. And then, like, it becomes a game where you're standing on that berm. As a proud graduate of the catchers myself, you're just standing on that berm, and you see somebody coming. You're like, oh, I'm gonna knock this guy out as soon as he gets close enough. You're just throwing, like, you are literally. There's no catching. It's like a formed tackling drill that you're trying to do, and this person is coming at you full speed down this zip line attached in this harness, just screaming at you. It is the greatest.
I think
yeah, go ahead.
I'm pretty sure 34 feet is made up from somewhere.
It's got to be made up, but it is a 34-foot tower. I can tell you that for sure.
It was nonsense. Hey, Jared, did you actually get to go on the big towers? Did that happen while you guys were there?
Yeah, so we had I did not, because what happened is
height requirements.
Man, you must be this tall to ride. Yeah, just where, last name being starting with P, they started with the higher alphabetic letters, and then it ended up getting a little windy, and so I didn't get a chance to go. But like, they put a lot of people into so these are, for everybody else out there, these are 250-foot steel beam towers. So if you don't,
they look like huge, huge, like those huge towers in Texas that they string power lines from. They have like 4 arms off of them, but they are huge. I mean, they're 250 feet tall. They're huge. You can see them from everywhere.
Yeah, you can either Google them, or if you saw We Were Soldiers, they're in that portion where Mel Gibson is catching the bus. But anyway, so if you do not slip away properly, or if it is too windy, as soon as they release you, you and your chute will go into the tower, and then you'll get tangled up. So that's kind of dangerous, because if that parachute doesn't tangle up, then you're just falling, hitting beams on the way down 250 feet. So as soon as they put, 4 or 5 people into it, they knocked it off for the rest of the day in terms of that. And then I think we probably ended up doing more PLFs or something like that.
I like how it took 4 or 5 people. That's like classic. First guy, they're like, nah, it's probably his fault. Second, they're like, meh.
Well,
let's see what happens.
It probably was their fault.
Well, the second guy, there's really only one way to tell. We got to get to an odd number here, so it's 2 of one and 1 of the other. Trent, did you get to go off the towers? Were you a super duper paratrooper?
No, I went through when it was easy. I think they'd shut that down, at least while I was there. And there had been an incident shortly before I went through. So, they had to like shower us off and stuff if it got too hot. And I think, like you put a few dudes into a tower, or like somebody, doesn't make it through, and if there's like a training incident, then things get pretty soft for a little bit. So,
well, I will tell you, it was awesome. The very first guy for us. So they were like, hey, the winds are good today. We're going to go ahead and do this. Again, to frame one of the closest things. So I think I was in Bravo Company, either Bravo Company or Charlie Company, one of the two. And the towers are, no kidding. The towers, they're in this huge field. And you're like, oh, that's cool. One way is totally fine. It's like this big field. The other way is like 10 feet. And then there's a road. And then there's the buildings. And you always look at these towers. And oh, by the way, the wind blows from the towers to the buildings. So you're like, that doesn't seem to make any sense. Like, the very first thing that's going to happen is these people are going to get blown this way. So sure enough, they take one of the guys up in the tower. they let him go. And as soon as they let him go, I was actually standing next to my favorite Sergeant Airborne of all time. I remember her distinctly. Her name was Sergeant Fontenot. She was from the backcountry of Louisiana, and she was country, like standing there with a dip in her mouth country. As soon as they released this paratrooper from the tower, she goes, "Oh no, yeah, that's across the street." I was like, "What?" And she, as soon, yeah, she goes,
She just
"Oh
calls
no,
it.
no, that's across the street. Yeah, watch this." She's like, hey there, Air Force, watch this one." So no kidding, this guy is drifting. Everyone on the ground, for whatever reason, is just screaming, "Slip away!" This guy is pulling down on every single thing, trying to get his chute to respond, and it's not. Remember the real old school, like, Blazers that had the huge back window? Like the first SUVs where that back window was just
like the
massive?
K5. Yeah.
Yeah, like the huge back window. This guy went, I mean, he shattered the back of that window because he went into the parking lot and he feet knees together, perfect PLF, but he was just drifting and he hit straight into the back of like a Bronco or a Blazer or something with that huge back thing and just absolutely shattered it and knocked himself out. And all the black hats were just like, "All right, yeah, I guess that's shut down for the day. Now we're gonna go to BLS." Like it was, yeah, here we go, guys. Great, thanks. And they shamed this kid for like drifting. It's your tower. It's 20,
we said slip away.
25 feet away from a park lot.
But everybody told him to slip away. Those are magical words. With a T10 Delta, why can't you just slip away?
We told you slip away. Everyone on the ground too. I'll never, because it was just like the weirdest. It was the most surreal experience. It's just this country chick going, "Oh yeah, that's across the street, Air Force, watch this one." And then everybody just going, "Slip away!" And then like this car just getting demolished by this poor 11 Bravo kid. It was absolutely hilarious. I just laughed.
Well, that's one of the I guess bad parts about that is because if you get hurt, which it does, I mean, people do get hurt, you know, whether it's a 250-foot tower, doing PLFs, funny enough, you know, some people end up
if your knees hurt from running the slowest of all time.
The airborne shovel.
Oh.
Yeah. So if you're training right now and you're, you know, used to running sevens, sub sevens, try running in a formation where you're doing like 9.5 minute miles, maybe 10. And then, so I would always try and get in the very back because they didn't put you in any kind of order, but I would always try and get in the very back so that you kind of have the accordion effect and so that I could actually like kind of stride it out a little bit and then kind of lay back and then catch up, just because it was killing my shins and my knees just running that kind of slow stepping on everybody. But there was a lot of people that ended up getting like legitimate knee issues or shin splints and ended up getting recycled. Not our guys, but you could see it a lot.
Well, I'll tell you, I thought I was going to get a disease the first time I walked into the barracks. I thought that's what was going to recycle me. Like beyond like the knee pain and all that other crap. Like, so like, you know, like Aaron knows too, like I'd been in the Air Force for a couple of years. You know, you get used to a certain standard of living.
You have standards, baby. We have standards in this team.
I remember I walked in there and I looked at my room and I was just like, are they serious? Like, and you want four of us to sleep in here?
That's right. It was 4-door room.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, if you 100%. Weren't, because I wasn't even, if you were like a senior airman, and when I went through, if you were an Air Force senior airman, they would treat you kind of like an NCO. But you're not. You go through as
they'd let you be in November because you wrote, it was like, that's how they showed that you were an NCO. They'd write November on your helmet and then you'd have your roster number. Like I was November 199 when I went through. So I only had to have 2 in a room. But that janitor's closet where I was sleeping, like, I don't even know. There was a rat that moved out and filed a formal complaint about those barracks. Those things were
so
the
bad.
Oldest. They would condemn them, but then, like, I just don't even know. They're still standing, by the way. The same jump students are still in the same barracks. Like, it is still, like, I think it's a point of pride with the Army now. Like, these things are 75 years old.
Yep. I don't know. All three guys.
Week?
Yeah, let's talk about jumping. So, like, after you get through all the injuries and all the nonsense and all the hooahs and the Sergeant Airbornes, then you finally get to sit in a room for an unknown amount of time before you finally get to walk out to a plane. So let's start with Aaron. Aaron, how long did you have to sit in that stupid shed before your first jump? Or how long did it feel?
Oh my God. I have no idea. So to get to what Trent's talking about here, right? So jump week starts off. So by the way, jump school would not happen without the United States Air Force. Who do you think flies the planes for the United States Army's jump school? The Air Force does. So you're sitting there waiting on who knows how many C-130s or, C-17s to get everybody ready to jump. So just imagine, how hard is it to organize your friends on a night out? Like to get everybody, dressed at the same time and getting in an Uber and going to the same place. That's hard enough. Now imagine getting 400 people to get on parachutes where you have to get a jmpi. People have never put on the parachute before. They're terrified, first of all. I was, just to give you a quick story, the first guy in my stick, so there's 20 jumpers to a stick there. The first guy out the door, usually they would ask for volunteers. They'd be like, all right, whatever. There was a kid from Georgia that his very first plane flight, he jumped out of it. He'd never been on a plane before. So he drove to, he lived in the area, drove to basic training, drove to AIT, and then, took a bus. And then his very first plane flight, when he was on a scene, they found out that it was going to be his first plane ride. So they made him jump first. So he was literally standing in the door, just absolutely terrified. Just just steely glaze looking out the door. But so you have to, again, Army timelines, right? So if you're jumping at 10 o'clock, well, that means your brief's going to be at 7. That means you got to be on those wires at about, 1 a.m. So they get everybody into your rig. You get your main parachute on, you get your reserve on, you get a buddy check, and then you get JMPI'd. Well, then you're not allowed to touch anything. And they call it the shed. And it's just rows and rows and rows of 100-yard long wooden benches that you sit on, and you just wait for your number to be called. If you're like the 40th C-130 that's taking off of that day, and that's not an exaggeration, like if you're the 30th, person to go, you are no kidding sitting in that rig for, 6 hours waiting for your turn to waddle out to the plane to go jump. However, in that shed, there's a little nugget of joy. And they don't play it all the time, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. They play the old school jump video. And that video is magnifique. I got to see it again when I went down to Jump Master School. Peaches, do you remember that video?
Do I remember being in it? Is that what you're... I thought that's where you were going with that.
I was
hand crank cameras.
We had too many jokes this episode.
I don't remember, but I remember the shed very well. And I do remember... I don't want to detract from your video story. Go for it.
That video, so it was produced, it had to be 1960s, 1970s. It was you could tell it was produced right in the very beginning where they figured out how to make it color. Where it's the Technicolor, this video brought to you in shining new Technicolor. And it was hilarious. They would take you through they'd be first you're gonna show up and you're gonna run with the elite during your PT test. And it's dude in old school fatigues, boots and utes, running like the instructor that was watching him was physically smoking a cigarette while he was writing numbers down. The music is just absolutely on point, and it's terrible track recording. It's the worst video editing of all time, and somebody was proud of this. The Army was like, boys, this is it. It's their website now. Intensive training, tip of the spear. But it had so many, it has the most iconic line I've probably ever heard. And they were talking about PLFs. So again, for everybody out there, parachute landing fall. They teach you how to get on a desk that's as high as your eye level, 6 feet tall, and how to just hit the earth. And they said they were in 3 weeks' time, they were going to make you so hard that the earth would hurt when you hit it. And people cheered. It was like a Lee Greenwood freaking song, and I'll probably stand up. People cheered to that video, and it was rowdy. It was the best part of sitting in that shed. And they wouldn't play it back to back. Every once in a while they would put it on.
I just the worst part about that with me is sitting there for 6-7 hours or whatever it was, and they would not let you touch your rig and stuff like that, and so
and no sleeping.
Right, no sleeping, and then if you needed to go to the bathroom, like, hey man,
It was the end of the world.
Yeah.
You had to get JMPI.
oh
Yeah,
It's not worth it.
They could not believe that they made you show up 7 hours prior to a jump and sit in a shed locked into equipment, and then you would need another. And then the worst part of it is that if there was any delay, then Sergeant Airborne was mad. So if you needed a JMPI, like God forbid you had to like pee, because then they'd have to like re-JMPI you. But then it was like a snake pit. There were like 9 jump masters that just like would materialize around you, and in front of 400 people, they would be like, "Oh, let's see if you got any gigs. Let's see if you hook this thing up correctly. Oh, is that a spot of urine on those pants, my friend?" And they would just go. I was just like, "Is this a thing? Is this a
shark attack?"
Let me assure you.
Oh, don't say that.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, I know. We can't do shark attacks anymore, but yeah. I mean, I remember they would. I mean, not necessarily us, because we were like, "Oh, we're going to get up and go to the bathroom," but. Some people, I mean, they would just piss themselves because they were just too scared to ask. And it was like, guys, I mean, for everybody out there, a JMPI, is a jump inspection, right? It inspects your rig and make sure that everything is safe, because, I mean, you are jumping out of a plane. But, I mean, those are skilled, and all the credit to them, they are skilled jump masters when it comes to JMPI.
Oh, yeah.
There was no one on earth that is better or faster than them, which means that they can probably do a legitimately a slow JMPI for them is probably 1.5 to 2 minutes per person,
which is
right?
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like I'll tell you straight up, like and it's a weird thing, right? Like I was a rescue jump master, and then when I came back to ST, my first assignment was at an ST, and then when I came back to ST, where I am now with my favorite chief of all time. Chief Peaches. When I came back, they were like, "Hey, good news, you get to go back through the formal course." And I was like, "Well, do I really need to though?" They were like, "Oh no, we totally got this. We totally hooked up the spot for you. You're already going." So I was just like, "All right, cool." I legitimately struggled, even after having those years of experience being a rescue jump master, knowing, like, I knew how to JMPI people. I had done it, hundreds, maybe thousands of times before. No big deal. I knew how to do that. It is hard to JMPI somebody in the standard that they want it, and those guys blow the standard out of the water. It is it really is impressive. Like watching one of those dudes that works at the JM school, at the Airborne School, go through a JMPI. It is lightning fast, and it is perfect. You cannot catch them screwing up. It is absolutely perfect.
But to my point is, let me go to the bathroom, and I come out and just JMPI me again. It doesn't take that, or we clean up some urine. I mean, like, because I'm going to go. You know what I'm saying?
You decided this ends up in the paper, Sergeant Airborne, but I'm going to the bathroom.
Exactly, man.
So you get past all that, and then there's the moment, right? Everybody's first jump. And one of the sayings is everybody's first jump is a night jump, because everybody closes their eyes, which I'm not even sure is true. I think it was partial night jump, my first one. But tell me all about. Aaron first. Tell me about your first jump.
Man, my first jump was literally like the perfect jump, right? I always joked around and said that if my 5th jump at jump school was my first jump, I would have quit because it was just terrible. That first jump, so we didn't have to really wait that long, so we were probably only in the harness for maybe like 3 hours or something, because I was one of the first C-130s that went out the door. It was a door jump. It was still in the morning, like the sun was just kind of rising. There was absolutely no wind, and I landed so softly right in the middle of huge Fryer DZ that I could have stood up. I hit my feet, and I could have stood it up if I want to. And you're not allowed to stand up. I could have stood it up. It was totally fine. But Sergeant Airborne is sitting there on a megaphone. And by the way, I was right near the PI. So Sergeant Airborne, no kidding, is right by me. And he's got a megaphone for whatever reason. And he's just like yelling into the megaphone. I'm like, that's not even how this works. Just talk normally, whatever. But he was like, you better PLF. So I like PLF, but it was like the weirdest, just like, I just kind of like fell on the ground.
Falling.
I was just like, oh man, it happened exactly like it was supposed to. Came out, my PLF was, or my exiting procedures were fine. Chute was fine. I looked around for a second. I was like, holy crap, I just jumped out of a plane. And then I hit the ground, and I was like, that was the softest PLF that I've ever had. They call it Hollywood when you jump slick, when you don't have any equipment on. It was a Hollywood jump. But I put my chute in the bag and I ran off the DZ, and I got to be honest, it was one of the more motivating times. I was like, holy cow, I just jumped out of an aircraft.
Jared, first jump.
Oh man, you guys are going to get a kick out of this.
Yes, we will.
You probably never jumped out of a 141, a C-141, did you?
What are you talking about?
C-141. Jared's jumped out of a glider.
You're just making stuff up now.
So I was.
that's not even.
Yeah, it's not in the inventory anymore. I don't remember when it retired, but yeah, I was probably. I'm guessing I was probably one of the last people to jump out of a 141. But yeah, so I think I had 3 of those and then 2 C-130 jumps. No issues with any of my jumps, but again, going back to people that would get hurt or something like that, if they didn't complete the 5 jump profile, which at the end of that week, should have done 5 jumps in order to graduate. Those people get recycled and have to recover and do the whole thing again. So, but mine was uneventful other than jumping out of a 141, which I think is kind of cool. Just shows I'm old though.
A perfectly good airplane. What was yours, Trent?
I had we were walking out to the bird. That's kind of the story. And there was some kid that I think had been a jump refusal or didn't want to get on or whatever, but he wasn't part of our chalk. Sergeant Airborne talks him into it. He gets stuck next to me. We're walking out, and this kid just gets inserted into our chalk. So we're on the plane, and he's walking out the door, first jump, and he just drops his line and kind of just dives out the door. So when I go and I hand my line to safety, and I turn and I jump, and when I would go down to reach into grab my reserve, just like they tell you to, right? And this is like a classic scenario. His line wrapped around my arm. Oh. So my very first jump, I came out, no. And it cheese grated my arm. I threw my arm back or whatever, and it did its thing. But you hear all the stories, and everybody tells you about the stories when you catch a line and it pulls everybody's biceps off or whatever. So I'm falling, Sergeant Airborne's yelling at me from the ground, BLF, hey, Airborne, slip away. I'm just trying to is my arm still there? And it was fine. It just tore me up a little bit, but I hit the ground and I was pretty happy just to make it past the first jump. And I wasn't going to tell anybody about it, but I still have the uniform with burn marks on it and everything. So I just did everything with my left arm for the next 4 jumps.
So you experienced that. Have you ever been behind somebody when they've done that, when they've accidentally wrapped their hand around someone's static line and seen what your arm does?
No, I don't want to see that.
It's heinous.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's man.
No yeah. That. I didn't tell anybody until we graduated, and then I showed someone my arm, and they were like, what is wrong with you? And I'm I'm not recycling. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Dude, that is a legitimate, your arm is just flailing and people's shoulders get jacked. Ooh.
Yeah.
Did you guys see any jump refusals ever when you guys were there? I didn't see any.
Just the kid that tried to kill me.
Just the kid that tried to kill me. I did see one of our dudes had a malfunction, did what he was supposed to. So it was our 5th jump, and for people that don't know, they invite people from the local area. They did at the time. I don't know if they did for you guys, but there's no kidding people in stands that are watching your graduation jump, watching that 5th jump. And when you walk off of Friar DZ, there's no kidding. There's people cheering. Good on them for the finesse. They've got some T-shirts that you can buy. They've got they had food that you could buy. There was a hot dog. There was a burger burn and stuff for us. It was actually kind of cool. It was pretty cool. But no kidding, we're sitting there and there's all these people, and you can watch everybody else jump that are still jumping because the drop zone is huge and it's obviously right in front of you. But you see this jumper go out, you see his chute immediately doesn't look right, and everybody immediately was pull your reserve. And he starts going towards the ground, and we all thought the worst. As he's picking up speed, you can kind of see him working through the issue. So it turns out, just as he came below the tree line, he was able to get his reserve out enough to slow him down and walked away from it completely unscathed. It was totally fine. But all of us were just like, oh, that's it. That guy just burned in. Like, in front of all these people, this is going to be terrible. And classic, Ranger contract dude, just hard as woodpecker lips, just comes right off Friar DZ. And it's just like, yeah, it was scary, man. Couldn't get my reserve out. Finally did, though. Anyway, that was kind of weird. And everybody was like, holy, you're supposed to be dead, man. Like, you got, those tall pine trees at Fort Benning, Georgia were like, hey, bro, like, you were like even with the pine trees when you got your reserve out. That's like 100 feet. You're not supposed to be here. He's like, oh, well, good thing they taught us how to do that.
Yeah.
That was it.
Jeez.
He was just like, we were like, oh, okay, cool. I guess we'll just go now.
I mean, for those that aren't aware, I mean, at Airborne School, you're jumping out at 1,250 feet. So there's not that much time if you do have a malfunction. So, I mean, it is a pull that reserve, try and get it out, and that's it. I mean, it's just
hope for the best, homie. Any lower, and you don't even need to, like, that was one of the funnier parts of jump school is they were talking about combat jumps, and it was during a brief, and the sergeant airborne was like, listen, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I've jumped from 800 feet. There's not even a purpose wearing a reserve. You might as well just not even wear a reserve. By the time you have it figured out, he's like, you're just going to hit the ground. He's like, when you jump at 800 feet, you jump out, you get a little bit of opening shock, you look at your chute, and then you're hitting the ground. That's what it is.
Yep.
So this one, bless his heart, bless his little heart, some Army E2 is like, Sergeant Airborne, so if you don't have a reserve on and you jump out and you have a malfunction, what is it that you're supposed to do? And Sergeant Airborne did not miss a beat, and he was just like, well, they're airborne. I guess your PLF better be very dynamic. And the guy just looked at me. He was like, "Oh," he's like writing it down. He's like, "Oh,
Write
okay,
it down.
dynamic PLF."
I'm going to refer to this later on when I need it.
He's like, "And this one is for me, and I'm going to get out of some trouble with this one."
Gee. Well, I think
that's
that
it, man.
Yeah, that kind of wraps up the whole airborne thing. I mean, we didn't even get into so many things.
You're not even going to talk about getting your wings? That's the last thing.
Let's talk about getting your wings. Was there a ceremony? I mean, it was like, "Hoo-yah, airborne."
Well, I mean, it was on the, I was going to say, it's on the cables, and then they go around, and I bet now they can't punch it into your chest, though.
I bet they don't, yeah. I would imagine that they don't. They were starting to crack down on it. They definitely said that you weren't allowed to do it, but
it was done.
Depending on who you, 100%. Like, my guy gave me like the bro handshake and then brought me in for the hug, and it was a very aggressive hug, and I was just like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, that you definitely didn't like punch them in. Nobody saw you punch them into me. You said, like, the only time the guy's ever liked me in his entire life, he gives me this very aggressive hug. He's like, oh, you did it, airborne. Like, thanks.
I think they had to ask us if they could give us a little tap or whatever. It was pretty stupid, but you're like,
it was weird, yeah.
Yeah, man. Like, I don't care. But
didn't bother me. I got the blood wings or whatever. But yeah, you're right. I don't think they were supposed to, and I would be blown away if they're still allowed to do it now.
Dang. Well, if you'd had video cameras, you should have recorded it and cried during the entire process. I've seen that's how it's supposed to be done.
And then upload it to TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joke's on you. I'm gonna cry about it anyway.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm done, slapping my thigh over here and giving very direct directions and all that other stuff. But Airborne School, I mean, you've heard us all talk about it. It's an interesting experience. We call it Air Force Appreciation School sometimes because it's big Army and it's a little bit different, but it's just like anything else. Keep your head down, take care of the task in front of you, and before you know it, it'll be over, and then you can come out and tell these ridiculous airborne stories like we do, and hopefully you can tell them a little bit better because it hasn't been 400 years since you went through airborne school. Like,
collectively, right?
Yeah, and you didn't invent the airborne. So make sure, go subscribe, like everything else. I think Everly stock hats are pretty cool. I just want to shout them out real quick, and then go to our website onesready.com, check everything out, and throw that discount code in for all the people that we associate ourselves with, and you should too. So that's it from us here, and go out there and earn each breath. Later.